Okay, so as you can see, the things I'm saying off the top of my head, in the midst of my life going on. Things I'm saying off the top of my head, I understand, is doing it this way for a few reasons rather than writing some script and being all logical about things. But the two halves of the brain represent the two halves of life, the inner and the outer. The way I'm speaking here is very right-brained. It's very intuitive. There's a massive cloud of information that's available to me in my own consciousness, connected up to the greater consciousness of everything that can be conceived. And there's a balance in life between being too open to what's going on and not really having your own what I'm doing in the world, or being too with what I'm doing in the world and not enough open to what's going on. But by speaking in the moment, my right brain is able to, my left brain, my logical self, is able to remember what logically I'm trying to say and make sense of. And my intuitive mind is able to zone into that noosphere and wait for whatever I'm inspired for what words to come out of my mouth. Now I have a good talent with that balance between the inner and the outer. I have what's called a creative type in the world. I have an artistic temperament that some people have decided they didn't like in a discussion or whatever situation. But here I am, and I'm just letting it be seen. Here's my life, here's what I'm doing at the moment. And at the moment, here's what sense I make of things. Now, there's like just an intuitive message that's coming from the world, but true enough, pothead. Fair enough, no problem. So I'm aware that there's a war that goes on inside in my own head about what I should and shouldn't do. And I'm aware that I police my own actions all the time, every moment of every day, in everything that I say and think and do. And I'm aware that I have little rebellions that go on inside myself sometimes, and that maybe they're aligned with solar flares, or maybe they're aligned with planetary transits in my birth chart, or maybe it's just happen chance. But sometimes events construe to create enough tension to cause me to pretty much trip out of my logical control and just go at the world, and apparently it's pretty terrifying or pretty inspiring. But I know that I'm hypersensitive to controls, and I'm hypersensitive to invisible controls. And I know that when I went to climate camp 6.5 years ago, at Heathrow, after the Big Green Gathering in 2007, I know that by the time morning came around, after being minding a fire all night with a nice social scene going on all night, when morning came around, a whole lot of people woke up who were in a control mindset. And it kind of niggled me a little bit hearing control-y freaks being control-y to their kids first thing in the morning. And that's all I can trace back out of how pretty suddenly, from having those early morning thoughts of hearing people waking up being grumpy and thinking, oh God, I hate control-y types, me getting pointed out by some control-y types and saying, hey, we've seen him before. He's dodgy. He acts in an uncontrolled way. And so it came about that a mob of 30 or 40 people dragged me off that site and threw me over the ditch. And I, in a rage to break through things which logically I would have thought better of, marched my way through 3 rings of police. 1,800 police surrounded that field of less than 1,000 protesters. Because for weeks, leading up to days, leading up to the event, the media was full of activist protesters, professional protesters, are all heading to Heathrow to say climate change, climate change, climate change. The world has to stop because we believe in climate change. So I'm a bit suspicious that climate camp and climate change itself are fear-based, control-based ideas. For sure, something's going on, that the planet's maybe hotting up, maybe cooling down. Something's going on with the weather. And for sure, the people who are ruling the planet are into control, and control is a fear-based mechanism, a survival-based mechanism that's actually nihilist destructive. There's a paradox, but hey, it's not the first one. So there's me first coming across climate camp, a few weeks after being at the Big Green Gathering, which had quite a lot of control going on in it as well, that you had to behave in a certain sort of middle-class, nice hippie way, otherwise you weren't welcome in the place, because some nice middle-class hippie fucking freaks were going to passive-aggressive report you to the security and trying to get you thrown off site, just because you might have raised your voice or said things that weren't popular, or whatever. Have a grimace on your face and not be happy-dappy. So it can be looked at that I've got issues, and I've certainly been looking at the idea that I've got issues. I've been looking at it really strongly for a long while. Back in 2005, I decided, right, fuck this, I'm getting down off whatever pedestal people are putting me on because I can speak poetry and I can speak a good clarity. And I've been put up on pedestals by people around Glastonbury and people who've been around the festival circuits, saying that I'm an outstanding member of community, or whatever words. Special. So I went away from public life. I went away from actively trying to change the world by gathering a group of people together big enough to make a difference and make an impact in the collective psyche. And I thought, man, fuck this, I'm just hanging out with a lot of fucking psychopathic people who ain't looking at their own stuff. I'm going to go and look at my own stuff and heal myself, rather than think I can heal the world while I'm going around broken. So that's a broken marriage and a split up family, and being separated from my son is what sent me over the edge to realise, hang on, man, there are deeper things to look at here. I need wisdom. I've got a lot of wisdom flowing out of me that's got people to put me up on pedestals for being able to speak beautiful wisdom. Being able to speak intuitive wisdom isn't the same as being able to hold that together down here in the material world, in a control system. Be able to monitor my own behaviour well enough that I can blend in well enough to not just be getting thrown out of pubs and getting thrown out of communities and getting thrown out of people's houses after pubs, or whatever it might be. Or as it comes to it, with regard to these videos, what I'm talking about is getting thrown out of protest camps for not singing off the same hymn sheet, or for not marching with the drum, or for not following the mob rule, or for not being impressed with the wavy hands meetings. So my simple intention here is just to question what's going on, not to be pointing fingers at other individuals and say that individual there is a problem and that individual is a problem and that individual is a problem, because I've experienced it. Being pointed out as the problem doesn't solve anything. Marginalising people who are already marginalised is only completing the work of what caused us to be marginalised, and that's way up there, untouchable people. That's people who are born into a system that they didn't create. That's people being controlled by a system that they're born into in the top 1%, so-called. Because have they really got any more free will than a person on the streets? Has the Queen really got more free will than a person on the streets? Or a person who's walked away from money? Walked away from their family's expectations or the world's expectations? So your questions, yeah, just questions that might be of value. 10 minutes. You brought the snakes back, Bee? And you brought Mummy an ocean? Find more. No, we're going to find more, Mummy. There's one over here. There's another one, Bee. So, camera's still rolling, Tara. I'm attempting to make sense without having written a script with one half of my mind. So I don't say anything off the cuff. I'm just saying things off the cuff without a script. Go away. I'll go away. How far do you want me to go?
Quite self-conscious for the
That's the unknown, Tara. In terms of who could be watching this, there's the unknown. There's no way of knowing who might watch this. We put it up in the random fucking blah blah of the internet on YouTube. But psychologically, it's just speaking in the mirror.
You see B in that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But here's an example of it. Look, I'm digging in a straight line.
Yeah.
And breaking it up into little bits. Making steps for B. Making steps for B is not logical, that's
Got
intuitive.
to find some more worms, some more
B
little
and B
snakes.
figured that out without logic. And to incorporate being able to hang out with a child who has no logical mind to speak of, and yet be able to do something logical like do the digging while the sun is at least shining somewhere. Yeah. Yeah, we're going to get loads more worms in a minute, B. You don't want more? Do you want to put them back in the wild, B? Do it. Release the worms. So to be able to be serious about something and to be able to be playful at the same time should seem like a dichotomy of something not so possible to do, and yet that's the very art of living. And I could try and quote from Marxism and psychologies and all the divided sciences out there in the whole wide world to put these fucking concepts across. This meandering way of just letting stuff happen and speaking in the moment is probably an awful lot better way of connecting all the dots than trying to work out what all the dots are and then put them in a sequence. Go free, little worms, go free.
Ready?
Freedom for the worms.
Ta-da!
So B has been calling the worms snakes, and I've been digging in the garden. And the garden is all full of weeds. The Garden of Eden is full of weeds. Some company called Monsanto has taken a personal decision to fucking try and wipe out all the undesirable weeds by poisoning them. And something called Agenda 21, and a depopulation project, is trying to say, Tara, that we can weed out all the useless eaters out of the world with Monsanto food. And by spraying us with stuff from the sky, and by putting stuff into the soil, and by putting stuff into our foods, and by putting stuff into the seeds that we plant in the ground, there to be some way that we can organise getting rid of the people who are unwanted. That's horrible, yeah. So this garden's just been full of weeds for ages, years, long before I ever came near it. And it could be full of wildflowers and fruit trees and other trees and all kinds of things, and even weeds. But as it is, it's just been weeds and nothing else, because the weeds have taken over. Because the people were caught up in going to work all the time and then being too tired from the work and having a television and a radio and a DVD player and now computers and broadband signals, Wi-Fi, fry the mind. Hi. Up the ladder on your ship, Pirateer B. I'm on the land, you're on your pirate ship.
Oh, my boat.
Yeah, your boat.
It's like a water.
This is like a boat, isn't it?
This like a water.
Yeah.
Little water.
So that's using our imaginations to look at analogies.
Little water.
And the whole language is full of analogies.
Water,
Yeah.
Water.
Where we assign certain meanings to certain sounds. Assign certain meaning to certain sound. That's language. Language. Land gauge. Gauge, to measure of the land. The meter of poetry. The sense of where I come from. Yeah. What's the time? Another 2 minutes. So whoever may be watching this in the internet, not live, because it's not recorded live onto the internet, it's just recorded onto a computer for now. And if whoever might be watching, this is what there is to make sense of. A garden of weeds instead of a garden of Eden. A thing called legalese that's telling us lies by sounding like something that it's not saying. A threat coming from the corporations and the whole monetary system. A monetary system that's based on usury. Usury. Listen to the sound of the word. Usury. Yes, B. Huh? Let's go back. Okay. Here, did you do it with this little bucket? This good bucket. What could you put in that bucket? Little stones. So I'm only making these videos because I'm trying to work something out. And I'm only putting these videos up on the fucking internet because I'm trying to work something out with other people, not in my own little ivory tower. And a lot of them other people
That's too heavy.
like at Balcom, don't necessarily agree with what I'm saying or the way I say things. Now, as far as I'm concerned, That's a certain amount of cultural mind control. Because people aren't too aware that that government that rules their land, that they think they're part of, this so-called England, this so-called Great Britain, they're limited companies in maritime law. They're financial institutions. They're not your government. They don't care about you. The poisoning of food, the poisoning of water, the poisoning of air, the poisoning of life, the poisoning of our psyche with television and internet and advertising and education. All of that is going on as far as I'm concerned. That's how I view things. Most other people kind of think, oh, it's great education. Oh, I have a degree in this and that and the other. So I'm just making these videos to try and express something that's quite outside the box of cuboid thought systems. I'm going to close down for there now. Go on, Tara.